Good day, fellow champions of inclusion. I am Aaron, and this is the Inclusive Dad podcast, where we explore inclusion and make it practical. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me in exploring ways we can create a more inclusive world together. You are important, you matter, and you can make a difference. Today, my guest is Mila Maxwell. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Why don't you just start us off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm originally from Nova Scotia, Canada, and I now live in New Brunswick with my husband, who I've been with for, oh my gosh, 22 years. We met my first date university, so university sweethearts. I guess we call it university, not college. We have an almost 11-year-old son, two French bulldogs. I'm a newly published author. I'm a volunteer firefighter. I'm a co-owner at one of our local gyms. And yeah, I like to keep myself busy.
Wow, that's a lot. Where did you guys see yourself or meet at the first day at university? Just walking across the grass or at a party or what?
So he was in his third year and I was in my
Okay.
first, and he lived down the hall. And I remember we were doing all these frosh events and I was so thirsty and I could not find water. And I said, is there no vending machine or anything in here? And then this beautiful man comes down the hall and he says, I have a Brita filter.
Wow.
So I had a boyfriend from high school back home, and he had a girlfriend at the time. So it wasn't an immediate like, oh my gosh. But yeah, a couple months later, we were an item, and yeah, we've been together since 2003.
I've never heard of a Brita water filter bringing people together, but now I have, I guess.
We really should have like incorporated that more into our relationship, like our wedding, or had a little shrine or something. But yeah,
Yep.
it's I kind of forgot about that actually till you mentioned it or till you asked about it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, let's start off. What is your definition of inclusion?
That I've never been asked that, but inclusion I think means, to me anyway, having a sister that has cerebral palsy. For me, inclusion just means making everyone feel comfortable in a world that isn't always built for everyone.
Right. That's a great definition. Do you want to talk a little bit about like growing up with a sibling with a disability and how that was for you?
Yeah, so my sister Sarah, she and I are 18 months apart, so she's 18 months younger than I am. Yeah, I didn't realize when I was younger that I was very sensitive, very empathetic, cared about what other people felt and thought. So as a child, I think a lot of those times, when my sister was struggling or things like that, it came out as anger, it came out as frustration. And there was always an added layer to our relationship where if you're, quote, normal siblings, that there isn't a layer of a disability or anything like that. You can fight, you can have disagreements, you can not be perfect. But with me and Sarah, I often felt that if I lost my cool or said something that wasn't right, it might have felt good in the moment, but then it was clouded with a layer of guilt to say, you know what, yeah, I want to be like normal siblings, but she doesn't necessarily understand, or I should be the bigger person, or, there was always that added layer that was very draining. And it's not, obviously, I care about her very much, and it wasn't anything to do about that. It was just, it was very heavy, a lot of emotions, a lot of fear, because she wasn't always able to communicate what she needed. So yeah, and even to this day, I just turned 40, so she's almost 39. Yeah, you always have to ask, like, are you okay? Do you need anything? Does your head hurt? Does your stomach hurt? Because she doesn't have that capacity to say, I have a really bad headache. I feel like I'm going to be sick. I need to use the washroom. Like she knows a little bit about that, but you always have to monitor. You always have to check in. So that was something I had to unlearn when I became a mother, that I said, no, my child is able-bodied. He can figure things out on his own. So it was something that took me a long, long time to not hyper-manage, to not hyper-monitor, to be like, no, if he has an issue, he can come to me. I can
Right.
still ask if he's okay, but I don't have to
Yeah.
constantly be doing it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, before we started recording, I told you I have a daughter, Cecilia, who's 22, and as you're talking about all that, asking a lot of questions like that, that's the same with her, where I ask a lot of questions, how are you doing? And I try on purpose to like not do that, but it's still hard to like, you pick up on something and you're like, oh, something's weird. She has cerebral palsy and epilepsy, so there's always the
Right.
worry she could be like starting to have a seizure. So then it's like, I feel like it's probably more because then something seems off or she's staring off. I'm like, oh crap, is she having a seizure? So there's just this, yeah,
Yeah,
hypervigilance about
it
making
would be a
sure
lot.
everything's okay.
Yeah, it's a lot. I
Yeah.
mean, it's and especially if you're a caring person. And I noticed I was doing it with not only my son, but my husband and friends and other people too, almost trying to constantly manage the room,
Yep.
managing people's comfort, and kind of forgetting about your own sometimes.
Yeah. So is she verbal or?
Yeah, so
Okay.
she walks with crutches. She is very verbal. I remember my mom saying, or my parents saying, when she was younger, they didn't really know a whole lot about cerebral palsy, and
Yep.
she was under a year, I think, when she was diagnosed. Or maybe I'm wrong about that. It's in the book that I just wrote, but
Yep.
yeah, they had said, she might never walk, she might never talk,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, she walks with the assistance of crutches, and she talks. She has a slight speech impediment when it comes to certain words and syllables, but
Yep.
and cognitively, she's not at her age.
Yep.
Um, so that's challenging sometimes. But yeah, we've learned to see the gifts in that, and to
Yeah.
to realize she's quite happy. She's content.
What was it like in school for you and her as far as, with her schooling and you being a sibling? Did people make fun of you or were they generally
Our
nice or?
No, our schooling, like, we were fortunate. So we were in kindergarten to grade 3 at one school, and then grade 4 to 7 to another, and then the rest was high school. And yeah, even though she's a year and apart, I think she was held back 1 year just for her comfort. So we were 2 years apart, and she always was in regular classes until high school. They had like a specialized program for students that needed a little bit of extra help, but
Yep.
she always had teachers' aides in the regular classroom. No, and I can't remember a time that she was ever made fun of. I actually think that came to me, as oddly as that sounds. I was bullied, I was picked on, and I'm not sure if that had to do with her. Maybe
Mhm.
that maybe they sometimes were uncomfortable. So then they thought, oh, well, she's tougher, she can handle it. So we'll be mean
Right.
to her instead, which in
Yep.
hindsight, I'm glad that it happened that way. Because A, it toughened me up, and B, she didn't have to deal with the added stress of that because she had her own stuff to deal with.
Yeah. I mean, I've found from after having, Cece, I mean, she's taught me many things. One of them is to be like, just live in the moment. She loves music, loves singing, and just watching her sing and, in her own way just really brings me in the present moment. I just love seeing how happy she can be in that moment. Is there any lessons like your sisters taught you about life?
Yeah, that's really important too. And I found the same with Sarah. Is she does live in the moment, but she also has a fair bit of anxiety. She's
Mm,
constantly monitoring herself. Like, she'll say, "Oh, well, we'll talk on the phone." And she'll say, "You're coming home. What time are you leaving? What vehicle are you taking? Where's Bennett, my son? Where's Bennett going to go? Is he coming? Is the dog coming?"
yeah.
So there's a lot of that as well, almost like the micromanaging. But on the flip side of having a sibling with a disability, I have noticed that she's taught me gratitude. That I think that's why I push myself so hard, because I'm able to do the things that maybe she
Right.
can't. And she doesn't think, oh, Mila gets to do these things and I don't. I don't think she has that capacity. And I tell this story a lot. I said to my mom on the morning of our wedding, because Sarah was a bridesmaid, and I said, I'm so happy to get married today, but I feel a sense of sadness because she's never going to get to experience this. She'll never get to fall in love. She'll never get to have a child. She'll never get to have these things. So always with those layers, right? That you can feel so happy for yourself, but also sadness for something that she might never have. So you're grieving for yourself and the relationship that you might not get to have with her, but you're also grieving for her to know the things she's going to miss out on that she might not even be aware of.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. What inspired you? I think I know, but what inspired you to write Finding Lady Baltimore, and how much of it is grounded from your real life?
A lot of it actually is grounded in real life. There's a few fictional elements, but I had to write it in fiction because I think I needed that extra layer of separation, because our character names are different in the book. It's not Mila, Sarah. It's actually Morgan and Sadie. So I kept the same first initials, and there is meaning behind those names and why I chose them. But actually, I had gone home. This was 3 years ago, and Sarah had come to visit, and she and I had this huge fight, like sisters do, about something trivial and stupid. And I felt so embarrassed and horrible about it. So she lives in a group home with 3 other girls. So mom drove her back home, and I was just stewing when she got home. And she said, "What's going on?" And she was very kind about it. And I basically spewed out 37 years of self-hatred, insecurities. And I said, every time I come home, I feel like I'm not good enough for her. I feel like I constantly screw up. I feel like I'm not mature enough. I'm trying to be a normal sister to her, but I lose my temper, like a normal sibling would with anyone. And my mom could have easily messed this up in hindsight, but she said, "Mila, no one has any expectations of you. She doesn't have any expectations of you. Your dad and I don't have expectations of you." She said, "You put so much pressure on yourself, and you always have." She said, "If she calls you at 8 a.m. when you're trying to get your son ready to go to school, you don't have to answer. I would feel frustrated to say, oh my gosh, why is she calling me now? Doesn't she understand that I'm busy?" But no, she doesn't. She doesn't understand those boundaries. So, mom really took the pressure off by letting me kind of basically explode and have those feelings. And she said, "You don't have to even visit her." And I knew she knew that was a stretch, but she basically took away all those pressures and those expectations. So the next day I came home and I called my sister that night, which normally I wouldn't have done. I would have just said, "Whatever, we fought, it's over." But I said, "No, I'm going to learn from this." And I actually called her and I said, "Listen, last night you and I had a fight, and it shouldn't have happened, and it was my fault, and I'm sorry." And she was like, "Oh, how was your drive?" Like completely changes the subject. And I said, "No," I said, "I need to do this." And I said, "I was disrespectful to you, and you didn't deserve that." And I'm not kidding. Probably a week later, I was falling asleep one night and I got the idea for the book. And it was this simple sentence. I think it was something along the lines of, and the character name is different, but it was along the lines of, what if something happened to me that, fictionally, of course, that allowed me to see life through my sister's perspective. So it was this full body, even telling that story gives me chills, because I was like, that's a book. And it was never something that I thought, I'm going to write a book someday. It was just this quick, like, oh, that's a book. And I have a background in journalism, so I was somewhat confident that I could handle it. But yeah, I worked at it for a few years, and it really did evolve. It wasn't just her perspective that I got to see. It was my own perspective as an adult, or I guess not an adult, but an almost adult in the book, compared to my childhood and things that had happened that I was able to see from a more mature perspective. I was able to see my parents' perspective, which in real life, I needed their stories. So it kind of made us talk about it too, things that we had maybe never talked about. My dad saying things, when you were born, you were, quote, perfect. And then when Sarah was born, not long after she was born, she she stopped breathing. She had to be rushed to the hospital, to a different hospital. So we didn't get that. They didn't get that like perfect newborn experience like they did with me. So I think it allowed us all to heal through it. And I like to say I was able to heal through fiction, even though a lot of it was true. But yeah, it was such a fantastic experience to be able to do this. And even now when I go home, I notice such a lightness in our every day in our relationship. And it's just easier because I feel like a lot of those resentments were able to come to the surface and just kind of be cleared. So it was really, really good.
That's awesome. How far apart are you and your sister?
18 months.
Okay. Yeah, my son Aiden and my daughter are 15 months apart. We had
Oh, wow. Wow, yeah.
Yeah, and he was more on the gifted side, so he has nothing like Cece has, and he was on the gifted side, so we had that perspective, and then he was born, and yeah.
Okay.
We didn't know anything until 3 months later when she started having seizures, so everything was normal up until that point, and we never really got an answer about what happened, so.
Okay.
Kind of, at some point, you're like, okay, let's stop doing testing. She's my daughter, I love her, let's just move on. We're not going to figure that part out, but let's, deal with what we have now and move on, so yeah.
Right, that's interesting that you say that because I think we're so curious or so I don't want to use the word obsessed, but we're so we want to label on things,
Yeah.
right? Why is my child, or in my case, why is my sister doing these things? Does she have this or does she have that? So
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, and with the labels too, like in the US you need like to get the diagnoses and labels to like access all the stuff you need, but then at the same time it like defines the person, I feel, and follows them, so it's hard to get away from it. So I kind of have this love-hate relationship with the
Right.
labels because it's
That's a good point, actually. And yeah, like you say that, and there's a part in the book that I mentioned my dad and I having a conversation to say, I wonder who Sarah would be if she didn't have cerebral palsy, and he says she wouldn't be Sarah. Right? It's you're always curious to say, I wonder what she would have done with her life had she not had this. Would she have gotten married? Would she have kids? Would we obviously our relationship might be different, but he says she wouldn't be her. She wouldn't be herself. And we wouldn't be us. We wouldn't be us either. So
that is true. Well, we're getting really deep early in the morning.
Right? I haven't even had coffee yet.
So you said you had a background in journalism. So had you ever written like fiction before, or was this your first time you wrote fiction?
It's really funny because I'm such a literal person. And in journalism school, they teach you, get to the point, don't fluff things up, tell the story in as few words as possible. So that was something when I actually ended up hiring, it's a company out of Ontario called Working Writers Co. And I knew that I needed more help than I was able to do on my own. That doesn't make any sense. But I tried doing it by myself for so long. And then I said, no, I'm going to hire some coaches. And I liked them because they edit your work as you're doing it. So you're not stuck writing an entire manuscript by yourself wondering, is this a book? Should I have done this differently? They help you kind of along the way. Sure. So I remember one of my editors, Alex, saying, you can fluff this up a little bit. Like you can describe the scene. You can use, you can use descriptive elements here. It doesn't have to be so flat. So that was something I had to learn along the way, to use descriptions and set the scene, because if you're doing a press release or you're doing a print story, it's like this happened on this day and that these people were involved and that's it. So that was a bit of a learning curve. But no, I didn't really, ever since high school, I didn't really write a lot of fiction, creative writing, that sort of thing. So I really enjoyed it.
That's awesome.
There was an element of imagination and creativity that I really kind of just, I kind of stopped overthinking and just went with it.
That's great. What was the most emotionally difficult part of writing the book and the most healing?
It's kind of a double-edged sword because it was both. Like writing the book itself was challenging. There were days that I would write for an hour and I would just be so drained. I'm like, I got to go take a nap now, because it was just, you were revisiting the past and revisiting things that maybe were slightly under the surface, but were kind of always there. I like a typical sibling. I call her names and did things I regret. And so writing about that was challenging. There was one particular scene, and this actually happened. I remember watching, what was it called? Radio with Cuba Gooding Jr.
Okay. Yep.
And I was in my early mid-teens when I watched it, and my mom and I were watching it. And there's, spoiler alert if you've never seen it, but his mom dies, and she's basically his only person, his only caregiver. And the scene where he breaks down after her death, I haven't been able to watch the movie since, and I'm even getting emotional just talking about it. So writing that scene, because I had always wondered, who's going to take care of Sarah if our parents die? Is that going to fall on me? Am I going to be responsible? Is she going to come live with my husband and I? Is she going to be part of our family? So, that always weighed heavy on me. So that movie actually made me have that discussion with my parents to say, if ever something happened to you, what would happen? And she had said, my aunt would take us in, and I was almost out of the house by then.
Sure.
But the most healing was just the book itself, and having those conversations with my parents that were always uncomfortable. But, I'd say, hey, Dad, can we talk about this? And to my surprise, he was very open about it. So I think our relationship, as much as my mother's and my sister's has improved, the relationship between my dad and I has been the most healing, for sure.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Have readers, especially siblings of people with disabilities, responded in ways you didn't expect?
No, because I expected them to say that they felt seen, and that's what they've told me.
Okay.
That they said, I see myself in your book and in your character. The most surprising thing was people that don't have a sibling with disability, that they said, I can see myself in your character. So that my mom and I had this discussion and said, every family has their stuff. Every family has their baggage. Every person has regrets and have said things or done things they regret. So I think, Morgan in the book, I think her character is very relatable, whether you have a sibling or a family member with a disability or not, because she goes through things that are so universal. And at the time we go through these things and we think, I'm so alone. My problems are unique. No one gets what I'm going through. But in reality, we all go through very similar things, even though they might look different, that if we just opened up and talked about it, it would surprise us to be like, I went through something similar, and here I thought I was all by myself, and I wasn't.
Yeah, that's very true. Did you have any, growing up or even now, did you have any connections or friends that also had siblings with disabilities?
No, so no one that I was close to. There was a little girl in all my grades growing up. They were 7 years apart, I think. A younger brother that was born that he had a very severe disability. I forget what it was called. But she and I weren't really in the same circles, and that's actually in the book too. Had we been maybe a bit more mature or been more self-aware, we could have depended on each other and confided in each other. And there is a teacher in my hometown that she's passed away now. The sister, she had a sister with cerebral palsy as well, a very severe case. So I remember my mom saying that she had reached out to her saying, if Mila ever wants to talk to me about anything, I'm here. And of course, you're young and you don't think that. And but she and I actually recently connected because she's a teacher in my hometown. She teaches grade 3. So she actually had me come in and chat with her students back in, I think, early June to teach them how to write a book and develop characters. So we reconnected on that and had some discussions. So it's never too late.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
What do you hope readers carry with them after finishing Finding Lady Baltimore?
That you're supported sometimes even though you don't know it, and to not be afraid to reach out if you are struggling. There's a lot of mental health in the book, but I think it is difficult when you're younger because you might be stubborn, or you might not. For me, it was not knowing how to vocalize what I needed to say, you know what, I feel scared about this. It always just came out as anger and frustration, which of course was not met very favorably. So yeah, to not wait till you're at that breaking point to talk to people, and to find, if you can be lucky enough to find a group or a confidant or more than one. And in my case, it was my grandmother. So you never know, but don't close yourself off, which is what I think I did for a really long time. I didn't want the bad things to come in, but I also closed myself off to support and love and all those positive things by closing myself off and making myself look tougher than I actually was. Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone writing a deeply personal story, especially one involving family?
Fiction is a great is a great mask, and I don't use mask in a negative way, but people don't need to know what's real and what's not, but you do. So as long as you feel like you're able to get those emotions and those things out, if you change names and it's not obvious, I mean, obviously it depends what it is. It can be such a healing experience. And I don't think that it necessarily has to be published either. If you can just write it out, and this is coming from someone that was always told to journal, and I never did. I never sat down and wrote what I was feeling. I just kept it all in, which in hindsight was a great idea because I was able to write a really, thoughtful book about it. But yeah, it doesn't have to be a memoir. It doesn't have to be all true. You can write it as fiction.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What are your plans? Are you gonna write more, or what are you gonna do next?
I'd like to, but I feel as though a lot of my my brain cells went into this book because I spent so much time on it, and it was I was so focused on it. I do have some ideas for another one, whether that comes to fruition or not. I am very proud of this book. I'm proud of what it's done for me. I'm proud of kind of the things that it highlights, not just for a sibling with a sibling of a disability, but like I said, it talks about Sarah's perspective and the struggles that she would have gone through, that even though she wasn't able to share them with me herself, I was able to talk to different people that have disabilities and things that they experience. Someone using a disabled washroom that they need, it's bigger, so I'm going to use it because I have a kid with me. It's like, well, some people with disabilities can't hold their bladder, and then they have accidents, which is a scene in the book. So yeah, highlighting those things and those topics, those talking points that make people realize, like, oh, hey, I never really thought of that. Like, that's something that I should pay attention to.
Sure.
Yeah.
What has surprised you most about self-publishing your novel? Would you do it again?
The price, oh my gosh, it was expensive. I know that I could have waited and sent query letters to big publishing houses, but then they control what the cover looks like. They control where it goes. Whereas the self-publishing, I have that control. I was able to decide what the cover looked like. I did use a company called selfpublishing.com, which they were fantastic. So they designed the cover. So I can decide where it goes and what I do with it. And it doesn't mean that down the road I don't get it traditionally published. But I didn't want to wait 3 or 5 or longer years to get the story out there. I knew that it had to come out, and I did it myself.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. What is one tip you can share to help the listeners be more inclusive today? So just something anybody can start doing today to be more inclusive.
Just to realize that if someone has a disability, whether it's obvious or not, that there's a human being in there. And I'll give an example. There's a girl that used to go to my son's daycare, and I know the mom, but I never asked, hey, what does she have? But she wears headphones, and I don't think she's verbal. And I said to my son, like, oh, I noticed, this young girl is in your class. Have you ever talked to her? And he said, well, no, she can't talk to me. And I said, well, it doesn't mean that she can't hear you. Mm-hmm. So, and this is something that I struggle with too, because you don't want people to think, oh, this person's just talking to my child because she has a disability or he has a disability. So even as someone like myself who has grown up with a sibling with cerebral palsy, I can still be uncomfortable because I don't want to make them feel uncomfortable. But that would be my advice, is to realize that there's a human being in that body, whether the body is able or not, and to put yourself in someone else's shoes. What, if there's no ramp at a store or a restaurant, but you're in a wheelchair, how do you think you're going to get in there? Right? To see those things that an able-bodied person might not be able to see, that someone that has grown up in that world sees everywhere. And not just able body, able mind. And that's the other thing too, it's we think of a disability as something that's very obvious. Oh, that person's in a wheelchair, that person has crutches, that person has a walking stick because they're blind. But a disability can be a mental thing or a cognitive thing too. So it's not always obvious. So to be sensitive to what other people are going through, because you don't always know.
Yeah, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the best place for everybody to connect with you?
I'm on Instagram and Facebook, so you can check at Mila Maxwell author. And the book, Finding Lady Baltimore, is available on all Amazon platforms.
Awesome. Ready for the last question?
Go.
Do you like Spam lunch meat, yes or no?
No, but I like its cousin, corned beef, which is hilarious because that's actually a scene in the book too.
Is it?
Corned beef sandwiches.
I don't think I've ever had a corned beef sandwich.
Yeah, so I've never had Spam, but I used to like corned beef. I had a bite of it the other day and I was like, oh God, that tastes like cat food. But as a kid, I really liked it.
Yeah, I live near Austin, Minnesota, where they make Spam and where the Spam Museum is located. So if you ever want to visit, you got to come to Austin, Minnesota.
Austin, okay. I'll mark that on my list next time I'm there.
There you go. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
To those listening, thank you for allowing me to be part of your journey. It is truly an honor. Please join the podcast newsletter by clicking on the link in the episode description to keep up with the latest episodes. Together, we can make the world more inclusive. Until next time, stay empowered and be a champion for inclusion.